much of your thoughts, speech, and action is influenced by the world? Is it a fraction of it, half of it, or all of it? How much of you is really you? Studies suggest that up to 95% of our thoughts happen in our subconscious, shaped by societal norms, culture, and external conditioning. We think we're making independent choices, but often we're just following invisible rules that we never agreed to. I was taught to believe that addiction was a moral failing until I became an addict. I was taught to believe that shame was protection until it nearly killed me. I was taught to believe that silence kept us safe until it became a coffin for too many people that I loved. I'm gonna tell you my story and tell you how stigma and the fear of judgment nearly killed me. And through this talk, I want you to ask yourself, when does stigma show up in what you hear, think, or believe? And ask yourself how much of that is truly yours and how much of it was taught to you. I was born in America, but I grew up in a post-9/11 world where being Muslim, Black, and Somali came with a silent burden, a weight that I didn't fully understand at the time, but I felt it in the stares, the headlines, and the whispers. I was raised in a single-parent household. My parents got married in a refugee camp after the civil war in Somalia, young and hopeful, trying to rebuild after destruction. But war leaves wounds that don't heal easily. So when they came to the United States, like so many others, their marriage unfortunately didn't last, and my mother was left to raise 6 of us on her own. Life was hard, but I didn't know anything different. I grew up in Cedar Riverside, a neighborhood that outsiders saw as crime-ridden, drug-infested, and dangerous. But for us, it was home. Brian Coyle was where we went when our lights got shut off at home. Their food shelf was where we found food when our fridge was empty. It was the only world we knew. And to me, it was enough. As a kid, I didn't understand drugs. Addiction was something so distant, something that didn't happen to us. It couldn't happen to us. Whenever I heard the word addict, the images that followed were that of homelessness, dirtiness, and shame. I remember sometimes seeing a homeless person in the streets from our community, and we were told not to talk to them. They were outcasts, they were forgotten. I even remember a man being removed from our local mosque during Ramadan because he was an addict. Shame ruled everything. I carried those beliefs with me for years, until life showed me differently. To me, my older brother was my father figure. He looked out for me, kept me in check, and made sure I stayed on the straight and narrow. His friends did the same. They bought me meals, gave me rides, made sure I was good. But then when I was 17 years old, they were all arrested in one of the most nationally talked about cases of 2015. My brother and his friends were accused of trying to join ISIS. The government had called them terrorists, but they were kids. The oldest of them was 19, maybe 20 years old. Some of them had been followed by the FBI since they were underage. They were kids, but the world had already made a decision on who they were before they ever got the chance to become anything else. And when they were taken, people whispered about them, but it was rarely asked, how did it come to this? What does it mean to grow up in a country that never fully embraces you, but never lets you go? None of them with priors, and all of them faced an uncertain future in a country that never fully accepted them. Soon after, they were sent into a system that was never designed to help them, and certainly not there to protect them. Now, before I get deeper into my story and share how stigma affected me and those around me, I want to share a study that shows just how much stigma may affect your life. In 1951, a Polish-American psychologist by the name of Solomon Asch conducted a groundbreaking study at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania to test just how much of our perception is shaped by those around us. He brought participants into a room with a group of people. What the participants didn't know was that everyone else in the room was in on the experiment. The task was simple: match the length of the line to one of 3 comparison lines. The correct answer was obvious, but then something happened. The group who had been secretly instructed to give out the wrong answer began to answer incorrectly. And despite seeing the right answer with their own eyes, About 37% of the participants conformed to the group's incorrect response. When asked why, they said they didn't want to stand out or assumed that the group knew something that they didn't. This study revealed a painful truth, that humans are wired to conform even when it goes against what we know to be true, that the world shapes us in ways that we don't even realize. This is the power of stigma, because it isn't just about what we believe. It's about what we're taught to believe. For myself, I didn't need an experiment to see how powerful conformity was. I saw it in my life. After my brother was arrested, he quickly realized the situation he was in, and he took a plea deal. He cooperated for lesser prison time, and as a result of that, our family became the punching bag. People hated us. They blamed us. It felt as if the whole world turned its back on us. I hated my brother for it. I hated him for what he did, for what it caused, for how it destroyed everything. I was so angry with him that I took it out in the world. I got into many fights. I was jumped. I was nearly killed multiple times. I hated everyone. My brother, my family, my community. That hate turned into depression. And that depression led me straight to drugs. At first, it was weed, just to take the edge off. And then pills, to make the nights quieter. And ultimately fentanyl, to erase the days entirely. I wasn't just using, I was disappearing. I overdosed several times. I was drowning in my own pain, trying to escape something that kept chasing me. And over time, I lost myself completely. For years, I walked around numb. I did whatever I had to do to survive. I spent so much years trying to prove myself to the world, that I wasn't a snitch, that I wasn't weak. I did everything and anything to prove myself. And over time, I gained what I thought to be respect, but that respect didn't get me anywhere. I was still broken, I was still angry, I was still drowning. And then one day I realized that the only way I was ever going to truly breathe and be free was to let go. So I started with the hardest thing that I could do, which was talking with my older brother. And truly that conversation changed me. I kept asking myself so many questions, like how could I not speak to my own brother for so long? And for why? I lost my brother, I lost my family. And what's the worst thing about it was that it was because I cared too much about what other people thought of me. I spent so much years proving myself out in the streets to people who didn't care whether I lived or died, while the people who actually loved me were waiting for me to come home. After reconnecting with my brother, I realized that I had lost more than just time. Truly, I had lost myself, and it was time for me to make a change. On June 10th, 2019, I had the hardest conversation of my life. I sat across from my mother, hands shaking, words caught in my throat, because saying them out loud made them real. I'm addicted to pills, I told Hoya. I expected anger. I expected disappointment. What I saw instead was fear. That same fear that she had when she first arrived into this country, when she fought to build a life here. But this time she wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for her son. My mother never dealt with addiction. Neither did anyone else in her family. She had no clue what treatment was, and neither did I. So the only solution we came up with together was to leave. So I left to stay with my grandmother in New York. I remember waking up and throwing up day after day in my grandmother's 2-bedroom apartment. The only thing she could offer me was black seed oil and honey, a Somali Hoya's only remedy to any sickness. Getting clean was the hardest thing I've ever done. I remember the first week, I was sweating and shitting and sleeping. I had no clue what Suboxone was or methadone. I never had even heard of the word recovery until a few months into my own. Even after I got clean, I still wanted to escape, but I couldn't ignore the fact that my friends were still struggling, still dying. A few months into my own recovery, a close friend of mine had overdosed. We had gotten clean together. We would text each other late at night whenever the cravings got too loud. We would talk about anything, from movies to shows to books, anything to keep us from using. Then one day, he was gone. And I couldn't understand. Why him? Why not me? How do you live with the weight of knowing that you made it when someone else didn't? That's the thing about survivor's guilt. It's not just about grief. It's about the unbearable question of why you still made it. It killed me. I blame myself so often, not only because I felt helpless, but because I didn't understand why I was spared. Overdoses in our community kept happening, but no one wanted to talk about it. Everyone afraid of the one thing that controlled us all for so long: judgment. That's when I knew we had to do something. That's how we started Generation Hope, a grassroots movement to address stigma, build community, and make recovery visible in the East African community. We started by hosting events where people could finally speak up without fear. Hundreds showed up. Mothers who had lost their children, people in recovery who never said it out loud, families who had hidden their grief behind different causes of death. For the first time, we weren't just whispering about addiction, we were confronting it. But then when the pandemic happened, the world shut down, and so did our events. People were isolated with nothing but their pain. In March 2020 alone, we lost 7 people in our community to overdoses. Every week, it was another familiar face from my childhood, somebody that I once had gotten high with, another name that I knew. The funerals kept happening, but no one wanted to call it what it was. People would say that they died in their sleep, or from a heart attack, or even COVID, anything but an overdose. The stigma was killing people just as much as the drugs were. I couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't enough to just host events or speak to people who already understood. People needed to feel it, not just hear it. People needed to see what we're so often afraid to name. So I wrote a poem called Survivor's Guilt, but I didn't just write it. I filmed myself reciting it, and I paired it with video footage from my very first overdose, something that my friend had recorded at the time. When I showed it to my family, there was an uproar. They begged me not to post it. They were still traumatized. They were afraid of us going through it again. But deep down, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt conviction, because this video was powerful. It was raw, and it was the truth. So I posted it, and the response was overwhelming. For the first time, I felt like people actually listened. And from there, we kept going. Poetry videos to short films into a documentary. And over the years, we reached hundreds of thousands of people. But it all started with telling the truth. How many people in this room are looking at me differently right now? Because of my story, because of things that I've done. Or maybe because of something that my brother did when he was just a kid. Because what you don't see in the headlines is, my brother paid his dues. He came home, he went back to school, he graduated, made it on the dean's list, and today he's a licensed counselor helping others find their own way forward. Here's the real question. How many times do you look in the mirror and ask yourself, which one of your beliefs are truly yours, and which ones are just bias disguised as truth? How often do we stop and question the things that we've been taught to believe? How many of us are willing to challenge the way we see the world, let alone the way we see each other? Because if we aren't questioning the way we look at the world, how are we ever going to change it? We talk about breaking the stigma, but how can we break something that we won't even admit exists within us? We talk about justice, but what does justice mean if we refuse to see people as more than their worst moments? We talk about progress, but how can we move forward when we still latch onto ideas that were never ours to begin with? This is the power of stigma, because it isn't just about what we believe. It's about what we've been conditioned to believe. And if stigma is built in silence, then disclosure is the only way to shatter it. Are you the 37% that would choose the wrong answer because everyone else did? Or are you courageous enough to challenge the status quo and challenge your perception of the world? Ask yourself, what beliefs are keeping you silent? What truths have you swallowed to fit into a world that was never designed for you to be free? Because if stigma survives in the absence of truth, then the only way to break it, my friend, is to break the silence first. So the last question I leave with you is, who would you be without the fear of judgment? Thank you.